Greetings and welcome to today's episode of the Haelan Nurse Chronicles. My name is Dr. Lorre. I am your host and author of the book, Nursing Our Healer's Heart, a recovery guide for nurse trauma and burnout that is available wherever books are sold across the globe. So today's topic, we are going to talk about nurse-specific traumatization, and we're going to look at a case study from a new graduate nurse who highlights her first year in practice. It is oh so common. I'm going to remind us, for those of you who are just joining us, that the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, the AACN, has a position statement regarding trauma. And that position is that nurses should assume that every person that we care for has experienced trauma or is traumatized in their life in some fashion in varying degrees. Now, nurses are a subset of the general population. So by inference, we could say that we should also assume that each nurse has been touched by trauma. And we need to conduct ourselves and do the healing work accordingly, just like the general population, only the burden of our work is so much greater. So for those of you, again, who are just joining us, my work is grounded in the recently published middle range theory of neuropsychological trauma brought forth by Dr. Karen Foley at Purdue University. And to review that nurses, as whole human beings who are inseparable from the contexts that they live and work, and the environments, we have been affected by any number of traumas, which could be acute, chronic, complex, developmental, or all forms of neglect. So within each of us, if any of those have touched our lives in any way and didn't get completely healed at the time, those unintegrated traumas, or what I refer to as those unhealed bits of wisdom, that are stored in our repository, stored primarily in our fascia, our neural plexuses throughout the body, muscles, bone, and skin, right? And so we bring all of those with us to work. Consciously or subconsciously, they'll come with us. They're a part of who we are. And then we get to work and we are exposed to an inordinate amount of trauma, much of which is avoidable. So, of course, we have vicarious or secondary trauma that is inherent with nursing. There's historical trauma that we're going to talk about today in this case study. There's workplace violence that we're going to talk about today in today's case study. Insufficient resource trauma, second victim trauma, which is often secondary to healthcare system inadequacies, and trauma from disasters. So it is a trifecta of trauma that I have spoken about, the individual traumatization that we experience as by virtue of being a human, the unavoidable nurse-specific trauma exposure that is inherent with our profession, and then there's the big doozy, the doozy that's driving nurses out of the profession, and that's avoidable specific trauma exposure that is secondary to the broken healthcare system and a host of other factors. So just to ground our talk today in reminding that, and I want to introduce you to my Haelan nurse community, which is, I have a public forum on Facebook where nurses can come together and really share their stories and be seen and be heard and be supported. And so we can really take a deeper dive into what is really, really happening in the nursing crisis. And it's not just burnout. It just isn't. I did 5 years of research across 4 disciplines. Burnout is part of the story, but it's the tip of a much, much bigger iceberg. So I'm going to read to you from the Haelan Nurse Community Facebook page, and it says, "Hi, my name's Kelly. I'm an ER nurse and just finished my first year. As we all know, the ER is busy as usual. If there is no time to take a sip of your water or even go to the bathroom in a 12-hour workday, then there is a huge problem. On top of never, all caps, getting a lunch break. One day when I was stretched so thin, I asked my charge nurse for a short walk away touch my breath of fresh air break, just a moment or two, so I could go outside and breathe before I started to cry. I was told no as the charge nurse passed by, not even stopping to acknowledge me or my pain. I'm just at my wit's end. They must not care about me as a human, I guess. It's not fair, and this is nursing now. It's wearing me down until I'm no more. I can see why people are leaving nursing, and I don't even touch on the cliques or the older charge nurses who thinks it's funny to continually, quote unquote, haze me. I brought it up to my director who didn't care, or she would have made changes a couple of months ago when I brought it up as a problem. It's affecting my whole work life. Time to find a new job. Well, first of all, Kelly, I want to thank you. I got the goosies. I want to thank you for so bravely sharing your story that I hear over and over again and has inspired me to do the work that I'm doing. And so what we know, and bear with me here as I come back to my screens back where they need to be. What we know is that we're losing about 25% of our new graduate nurses. By the end of this decade, the world will have just over one half of the nurses that it needs. And so many of you might be thinking, well, there we go. It's just nurses eating their young again. It's just the way it is. And I want to challenge that paradigm. I want to challenge that assumption that nurses are eating their young. Because in my work, what I discovered is that nurses are not intentionally eating their young. When you really start doing some deep research and looking at this phenomenon through the lens of social science, which I have done, through the lens of polyvagal theory, which I have done, through the lens of integrative nursing, and through the lens of relational neuroscience and caring science. Okay, so those are kind of all the cluster of sciences in which my work is grounded. What we see is that we have the legacies of unintegrated nurse-specific traumatization being transmitted from one generation of nurses to the next, to the next, to the next. And like implicit bias, this is like an implicit transmission of traumatization. And it's been so pervasive and such a part of the nursing culture for so long that many, many nurses take it for granted, shrug their shoulders, and say, well, I guess that's just nursing. I guess I should just suck it up, buttercup. All right, so let us be very, very clear. What is happening to my friend Kelly is nurse specific traumatization. She is on the receiving end of the unintegrated trauma that nurses embody and transmit unknowingly from one generation to the next. What she is also experiencing is workplace violence in the form of bullying, in the form of incivilities, and in the form of hazing, in her own words, hazing. So when I look at it through that lens, it doesn't, all of these lenses actually, it surprises me not in the slightest that we have 1 in 4 nurses roughly leaving the profession. And what happens, just like Kelly, is that absent the tools and the resources and the education to really understand what is happening in one's nervous system, how one's brain is responding to all of this, how that is driving behaviors, that nurses tend to job skip from one job to the next. And I'm not calling anybody out. This is a systemic problem. This is so systemic and pervasive that the vast majority of nurses are unaware of it. And that's sort of my job, is to hold up these big floodlights on it and bring forth as much of the evidence that I have researched and bring it out so that we can really start transcending, healing and transcending the systematic oppression of nurses by all sorts of forces who are profiting and benefiting from our caring hearts, our healers' hearts, and our skill set and our education. And so it's very expensive. It's very expensive for a nurse to job hop, and understandable. Like you can't stay in a toxic work culture. I mean, it's healthy to make a pivot. But what I would like to do through my work is help nurses like Kelly, insulate themselves from the broken healthcare system, insulate their nervous system, get more coherence between the left and the right hemispheres, start leveraging the properties of neuroplasticity. So start understanding how trauma manifests in nurses, the unintegrated trauma that is being transmitted, what that looks like through the 10 archetypes that I developed and the 3 resistance practices that we can all observe in the workplace. And when we really start seeing this for what it is, what we have are traumatizing nurses. You know, that old expression, hurt people. Well, I'm here to be the cycle breaker, one of many. I'm doing my part. I'm doing my part to be a cycle breaker and interrupting the transmission of avoidable nurse specific traumatization and this nurses eat their young sort of pattern that we find millions of nurses engaged in. So I'm hoping that this brings some light in, that even the nurses who may have been engaged in the hazing or the bullying, or the charge nurse who dismissively walked by when one of our most vulnerable nurses, the first year of our first year nurses are the most vulnerable among us, and dismisses her need to go outside and take 3 deep breaths before she starts crying in shift. That nurse that walked by and dismissed her, that's a traumatized nurse. The director who took action, that's probably a traumatized nurse, right? And these, and so what happens is we start to get desensitized. We start to believe that this is normal and that this is okay. And this new graduate nurse, Kelly, she's like, she knows it's wrong. She knows this is not okay. The new generation of nurses coming in are saying, oh, heck no. Oh, heck no, I'm not going to be treated like this. And they're leaving. So, 1 in 4 are bouncing. And so let us come together as a global nursing community and understand that we have been systematically abused for centuries. We embody the unintegrated trauma of those who have gone before us, and we are unknowingly, unintentionally transmitting that from generation to generation to generation of nurses. I hope that you will join me in being a cycle breaker and saying no more to this and helping me shine these floodlights on the nursing crisis, which is not just burnout. So, what can you do today? You can certainly go to my website, drlorrelaws.com. We'll drop the link in the show notes. And there I have for you a free sample chapter of my book. I also have there for you a short self-survey where you can assess how you have been affected by more specific traumatization. And you can also learn more about my Breakup with Burnout Academy for nurses. And that is sponsored by my nonprofit organization that is devoted to supporting and serving nurses worldwide in recovering from nurse specific traumatization and burnout. Until next time, I want to thank you so, so much for the important work you're doing. I want to hold Kelly and all the nurses who are experiencing what Kelly has experienced. I've got my heart wrapped around yours. I've got my heart wrapped around all of us. as we start to break the cycle, liberate ourselves from all the oppressive forces who are profiting on the backs of our suffering, right? So that we can come together and insist upon a global paradigm shift for nursing, what I call nursing 2.0, the nurse safety and professional well-being edition. That's the big goal in the big picture. In the small picture, it's helping and supporting nurses just like Kelly, just like the charge nurse, just like the director, all of whom are sort of in this demonstrating these unconscious behaviors of historical nurse traumatization. So thank you, thank you, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, thank you, thank you for the important work that you're doing. And until next time, namaste.